Coming up on One Detroit, we're in Roseville at the old School Deli. Nolan Finley reports on new guidelines that affect how many people are in jail and for how long. Plus, it's an election 2020 closer look at Macomb County, why voters here get a lot of attention when it comes to presidential politics. And Hitsville, USA, hear about the $50 million expansion plans for the Motown Museum. Stephen Henderson talks with CEO Robin Terry. I'm Christy McDonald. Join me. One Detroit is coming up.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, Business Leaders for Michigan, and by
the DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Also brought to you by Ally, Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.
Hi there and welcome to One Detroit. I'm Christy McDonald. We are at the old School Deli in Roseville, and I have to be honest with you, I'm a sucker for places that serve breakfast anytime, and word is they're the only joint in Macomb County that makes their own pastrami. I'll have to report on that. We'll get to know this place a little bit more coming up later on in the show. But we have a lot coming up for you this week. Nolan Finley has the latest on the state task force recommendations on how long people should stay in jail. He talks with Supreme Court Chief Justice Bridget McCormick and a former state lawmaker who experienced the jail system firsthand, Craig DeRoche. Also coming up, our election 2020 coverage, taking a closer look at voters in Macomb County. What's the history in the county that swings elections? I'll have that story coming up. And then the Motown Museum, a Detroit jewel that's expanding. Stephen Henderson talks with CEO Robin Terry. That's what we have coming up for you on the show. But we're starting with new guidelines, which could be heading to state lawmakers on the amount of time people spend in jail. The bipartisan jail task force spent 9 months looking at the growing jail population, even while the overall crime rate has declined. Why was that happening? They traveled across the state looking for public input while analyzing stats and ideas for reform. The group came up with 18 recommendations to overhaul the system. Nolan Finley sat down with task force co-chair, Michigan Supreme Court Chief Justice Bridget McCormick, and task force member Craig DeRoche, a former state rep who now works for a nonprofit assisting prisoners and their families. They talked about what needs to be changed.
We knew that even though crime was at a 50-year low, the numbers of people in our jail was 3 times what it was 30 years ago. What we didn't know was why. We didn't have any statewide data on who was in our jails, why they were there, how long they were there, and what was driving that growth in jail populations, and was it actually making our communities safer? Together with the leadership in the legislature and the governor and the Michigan Association of Counties and the Michigan Sheriff's Association, we put together a really diverse task force to tackle those questions.
And so, I mean, you were puzzled over the last 45, 50 years. Crime in the state has gone down. Jail population has not. It's remained stable. When you dug into the data, which the Pew Charitable Trust helped you decipher, helped you gather and analyze, what did you find? I mean, what was the answer to that question, the why?
Yeah, let me reiterate that without the Pew Charitable Trust, we would not have had the data that we now do have to be able to have a better understanding of who is in our jails and why. And what we learned is in Michigan, about 50% of the folks in our jails are not convicted of any crime. They're pre-trial. They're waiting for process. And about 50% are serving some kind of sentence either for an offense or for a parole or probation violation. We also learned that our rural jail populations have grown considerably more in recent years than our urban jails. And we learned what specific offenses were landing people in jail. Basically, we learned there are two different populations. There's a large number of people that are cycling through our jails for short stays, but those short stays are quite disruptive. You know, even in a 3 or 5 day stay, you can lose a job, you can lose your kids. They're incredibly disruptive. So there's a big population serving short stays, and then a much smaller population serving far longer stays. I think you saw some of those folks when you visited the Genesee County Jail, Nolan.
I mean, we saw people up there who've been in jail 4 years or more and hadn't had their trial yet. Craig DeRoche, you participated in this task force, you were a member, but you've also had your own experience with the justice system. You were arrested twice and jailed for drunk driving. It led to your exit from politics. Now you're working for reform. How does your own experience inform your work on this commission?
Yeah, well, what I tell people is, look, I'm one of those people. You know, when you're talking about the politicians that have the pressure on them with the decisions they make, I was one of those people. I was also one of those people that lived in addiction, broke the laws of the state of Michigan, violated my probation, and had to be held accountable for that. And we believe that at Prison Fellowship that you should hold people accountable for what they do wrong. That's a form of love as well, and that's justice. But what we have seen in the country, and particularly here in Michigan with the jail system, is that accountability is not tied toward any level of proportionate repayment for the debt that somebody has, and it's not geared for success. It's not taking somebody from a behavior that is a hazard to our community and moving them toward a crime-free lifestyle.
Let's start with bail and bond reform. What are you recommending?
The task force is recommending a number of reforms in that area, specifically that everybody should be able to see a judge within 24 hours of their arrest if they're held. Frankly, there are some reforms that could allow them to be released before that. We recommend allowing police officers to use citations more than arrests in many more offenses, ones that don't impact public safety. As well as allowing sheriffs, we recommend allowing sheriffs to release people from the jail who are not a threat to public safety. So a lot more opportunities for release at the front end. But if you're held, we think you should have a right to be seen by a judge within 24 hours. So a judge can review whether you really are a threat to any individual or more than an individual in the public, and you won't come back to court. And then we also recommend that you have a probable cause hearing within 48 hours. So basically, we want to make sure that the only people who are held before their trial are people who truly do pose a risk to public safety. Those folks should be in jails. And right now, if our jail space is taken up with people who don't pose a risk, we're not making the public safer.
Which recommendations do you think would have the most impact?
All of them.
Okay.
Every one of them.
So hit a few of the highlights, if you will. We can't go through all 18, but...
Well, I think if we can even just get right not suspending folks' driver's licenses for crimes that have nothing to do with driving safety.
Which is typical in
if you,
Michigan.
failure to pay your child support, if your driver's license is suspended, that's not going to help you pay the child support you owe.
Okay.
So if we can decouple suspending people's driver's licenses from so many crimes that have nothing to do with driving safety, that'll be a huge step forward. If we can make sure police officers and deputy sheriffs have some discretion at the front end when they can tell somebody is suffering from a mental health crisis or an addiction crisis and can be better served in a place where those issues can be treated than a jail, we'll be better off. If we can rethink how the presumptions that people have when they show up in a courthouse and they're not charged with a crime that puts them, that makes them a risk to public safety, we'll be better off. But I promise you they're interconnected and they all matter.
Bottom line question is always, what's this going to cost?
I'll speak into that because this is a philosophy of government. What we pay in Michigan is extraordinary for a system that does not give Michigan a good result. More than we invest in higher education, as you yourself have pointed out, Nolan, over the years. It is an immense failure of government. What we have seen around the country, that you invest in mental health. Yes, it's new spending. You invest in data collection, for these counties to find out what works. It's millions of dollars, in some cases tens of millions up front, but what it does is it reduces the size and the scope and the cost of government in other ways. And we've seen that in every state that has done these type of reforms. Their crime has gone down, their expenses have gone down, but you end up spending more in different areas. But those different areas yield great results.
Turning now to our election 2020 coverage. Seems like every time you talk presidential politics, the pollsters point to Michigan as a key state. Well, we wanted to take a closer look at voters in Southeast Michigan to better understand why. How have voters changed in recent years? What population shifts do we see? And how does that affect the vote? It's fitting that we sit here in Roseville and start off with Macomb County, the county that all pundits want to understand. And it's often called a bellwether for the country, for good reason. In the past 10 elections, Macomb County voters have chosen the winning candidate 8 times. Going back to the 80s, the counties voted twice for Ronald Reagan, then voted for Bush Sr. In 1996, voters chose Bill Clinton, then solidly chose Barack Obama twice, before flipping to Donald Trump in 2016, giving him 54% of the vote. It's these voting habits that have interested political pollsters and national media alike. But before we get deeper into voting habits, who are these neighbors in Macomb County so keen on predicting presidents? And how have they changed in recent decades? For the numbers, we turn to the census data from Macomb County and Metro Detroit stats guru Kurt Metzger, demographer and director emeritus of Data Driven Detroit. We spoke to voters in Warren at our first community conversation at Dovetail Cafe in November. They had a sense of the demographic changes in their county. Let's find out just how right they are.
We've lost our youth. They've moved away.
It's true. 17% of the population in Macomb County is over 65. Millennials make up only 26% of the population. In comparison, 33% of the people in Wayne County are 20 to 39 years old.
Macomb is aging. Mainly what we're seeing is because of births going down, a lot of young people leaving Macomb for other areas.
What about diversity?
I think when you look at Macomb County, what a lot of people don't realize is that it really kind of is a piece of America because of the diversity that we have from 8 Mile all the way up to the top of Macomb.
Very true. Since 2010, more than 31,000 African Americans have moved into the southern end of the county.
What we've seen is a lot of movement from Detroit into southern Macomb, particularly because of the schools. When the economy tanked in the 2007, 2008, we had foreclosures, so you had a lot of openings, and African Americans with less resources who couldn't afford to go to Oakland County found Roseville, Warren, East Point particularly.
And immigrants from all over the world have settled in Macomb County.
So Macomb County tends to get more recent immigrants. They haven't established themselves, so they're lower income in many cases.
Metzger says the county has a large Chaldean population, and they are Catholics from northern Iraq, in cities like Sterling Heights, Macomb Township, and Shelby Township. Both Syrian and Iraqi immigrants call Warren home.
Macomb has the largest Albanian population of any county in the country and continues to get Albanians.
Other immigrant populations, Metzger points out, include Ukrainians, Bangladeshi, and Hmong. Much of the Hmong populations come from Vietnam, Cambodia, and Thailand.
Macomb has really gotten on the bandwagon to be one of the first welcoming counties in the state, very much realizing that the diversity is a strength that they have.
What happens as you head north in Macomb County?
There is a divide, or perceived divide, within the county, that in the north end you've got some pockets that are the wealthiest parts of Macomb County, up around Shelby and Romeo. And down here, you have some of the poorest pockets of Macomb County.
There is a trend of young families with more wealth choosing to live north of M59.
What we've seen is M59, that northern from Shelby, Macomb, now moving even farther into Ray Township, up near Armada, Romeo, those areas. A lot of Oakland County transplants, primarily white homeowners moving into those areas, tended to be larger families, looking for the larger homes and those opportunities and good school districts.
Despite the movement into and out of Macomb County, it is still the third most populated county in the state and has seen higher than average voter turnout in recent years. In the 2016 presidential election, Macomb County had a 67% voter turnout. Statewide, voter turnout was 63%. For the 2018 midterm election, Macomb has a 59% turnout, higher than the 55% turnout statewide. Stan Greenberg is a Democratic pollster well known for studying Macomb County voters and working on Bill Clinton's election campaign.
I first went to Macomb County when I became a pollster. I left academia to try to figure out how the Reagan Democrats abandoned Democrats and what Democrats could do to get them back.
And despite all the demographic changes in Macomb, there's one voting bloc that piques interest as he continues to talk to Macomb County voters.
You know, though Macomb itself, has changed and become itself a little bit more diverse, but it's still a place where white working class voters are predominant.
He believes it's these white working class voters that flipped Macomb County in 2016 and gave Trump the election.
We have an election where Hillary Clinton ignores Michigan, doesn't respect working people, doesn't run on the kind of issues that matter to these voters. And when they're not respected, they turn away, and Trump was talking about trade, throwing out NAFTA and these trade agreements and working for them, and produced a margin in Macomb that was big enough to give him a win in Michigan. If not for Macomb, Trump would not have won Michigan and maybe would not have won the presidency.
But he's not so sure Macomb voters will swing the same way in 2020.
I'm not one of those people who think the Trump voters, the swing Trump voters, are still with him. I think 2018, the blue wave, was a realigning election, played out in the biggest possible way in Michigan. This strong economy does not produce jobs, does not produce wages increases for them, and so they don't see any wage increases. So I think they see a president who governs for the rich, not for working people. It's a hard road back, I think, for Trump to regain Michigan.
And keep watching our Election 2020 coverage. We'll have in-depth reports on the makeup of Oakland and Wayne County voters, too, in the next few weeks as we count down to the Michigan primary in March. All right, now to a Detroit landmark, Hitsville, USA. The Motown Museum is undergoing a major $50 million expansion. They broke ground last fall. Stephen Henderson spoke with Motown Museum CEO Robin Terry on American Black Journal.
So let's talk about what's going on at the museum, which is the living part of Motown here in the city. You have big plans, and you're raising big money.
We are. That's all true. I mean, truly, the highlight for me when I think about the entire year, it was that moment we broke ground.
Yeah.
Having my uncle here, Barry Gordy here, all of our other supporters. It meant so much to say, this is that moment, this project is real, and this vision is going to come to fruition. Yeah. Having the support of our donors, that night we announced $1 million gift from John Rogers, the head of Ariel Investments. And so we had just announced my uncle's gift of $4 million. So it just showed that there's so much support for this vision. And it was just very real in that moment. Yeah, really.
So most people watching probably have been to the Motown Museum before, and it's really cool now. But you are really talking about creating something entirely different with this expansion. Talk about how different it will be and what some of the influences are for that.
So let me start with what won't change, because this would get you lots of calls and emails.
People
so
saying, you can't
what won't
that.
change is Hitsville, USA.
Right.
The crown jewel of Motown Museum. That is why people travel from all over this planet to come to Hitsville.
Yes.
Right. They want to stand in the footsteps of Stevie Wonder and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles and the Supremes. And I mean, that authentic DNA doesn't change. But what the expansion does allow us to do is really activate the inspiration that you get when you come to that space. And so I was talking about, my grandmother, Esther Gordy Edwards, who founded the museum. She really just wanted to make sure that history wasn't lost over time and that people understood what these young people that we talked about, what they created there and the profound impact they had on the world. So that was good. what we're doing is we're saying, let's build on that. And when people come and they are inspired, let's find a way to connect them to something to elevate their own potential. So if it is a mother or grandmother or that mother or grandmother saying, you know, I want to cultivate my singing or my songwriting, or I'm interested in entrepreneurship, we're going to give them some place to plug in and train and mentor and connect them to industry. And so anyway, it's all about creating opportunity, which is exactly what Motown did in Detroit.
And the scale here, 50,000 more square feet, it seems to reflect, I think, appropriately, the scale of this legacy.
Absolutely.
Not that there's anything wrong with the current museum, but I think you would expect it to be on the scale that you're trying to build now.
Well, I always say, you know, we started by getting the original homes, right? Securing those original homes. And those homes tell an important story about Motown's humble beginnings, the entrepreneurial spirit of Motown. But the story doesn't stop there. And so what the newer construction does is it shows you what rises from that. And, you know, it becomes multi-sensory, multimedia, you know, a music lover's playground, but still, you know, wrapped in this story of Motown and how did the impossible happen on West Grand Boulevard. And that's what everybody wants to know.
Your uncle said earlier this year he is going to retire from entertainment, which also seems impossible.
I don't know what that means.
Right? How is that going to work?
I don't know what that means coming from somebody who has been creative his entire life, you know? But he is in a space in his life where, you know, he's pouring into other people who are making things happen, and he sees himself as a teacher and wants to pass along his wisdom and his lessons learned. And I can say I feel really honored as his great niece to be the recipient of a lot of that wisdom.
Is he going to be more involved maybe in the museum? Is he going to have more time to be connected
I will tell you what he told me while he was here, because I made the mistake of telling him that there was something I couldn't reach him for. And he said, don't ever say that. He said, you can reach, you know you can reach me whenever you need to.
Right.
And so I say that to say that, you know, he already has tremendous input in creatively what we will bring to this, but we go to him. And we let him, you know, work with the team and give us wisdom and keep us on track.
What's the timetable for getting all this done?
It's when we raise the dollars.
Get all the money in place,
and I keep saying that, and people say, Robin, I know it's when we, but that's real. You know, we have been successful in raising half the dollars needed, 25 million, which is a tremendous milestone, but we've got a long way to go. And so, you know, we're looking for partners and people who want to invest in this really unique opportunity to leverage such an important part of our culture and the future.
I mean, it's hard to come up with anything really that is more reflective of us as Detroiters and of this city over the last half century than Motown.
I would agree with you.
I mean, what else would we try to build to sort of tell that story, other than something like the Motown Museum?
And something that speaks so loudly about us as Detroiters all over the world. You know, I think that's what continues to keep me in awe of this legacy, because I meet people who I think should have no connection, and they feel as personal about it as I do, you know, and I'm like, you're from this remote place around the globe. How could it possibly mean so much to you? But it does.
The music spoke to everybody.
It really did. And I think in a really profound way, you know, Motown music did something nothing else could, and that was bringing people together. And people who were very, very different beliefs, different faiths, but somehow this music created a space for them to celebrate together, and that's been reflective of our entire year.
All right, before we leave the show, we have to know a little bit more about the Old School Deli. Steve is the owner. So you guys opened up 6 years ago.
Correct.
And this automatically feels like I've been here a really long time. This is a homey, this is a family place.
Well, that's what it's supposed to be. First time you come in, you're our guest. Second time, you're family. I spent 12 years in the insurance business. and just had a midlife crisis, and I said, you know what, I'm changing careers.
What makes this place different than others around the area, do you think?
Michigan-made products. Our corned beef comes right out of Eastern Market. Our pastrami, we do that scratch in-house. Our biscuits and gravy are scratch in-house. It's not just me, it's the people working with me. And I always say, don't work for me, work with me. That's important.
That's a good phrase to remember. Steve, thanks so much for having
you.
us. So you're going to make me a pastrami sandwich?
You want it?
All right, we're going to have to do this. We'll see you next week on One Detroit. Take care. Let's go.
Grilled rye?
That's it.
Come on.
You can find more at onedetroitpbs.org or subscribe to our social media channels and sign up for our One Detroit newsletter.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
Support also provided by the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV. The Detroit Journalism Engagement Fund, Business Leaders for Michigan, and by
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
also brought to you by Ally, Nissan Foundation, and viewers like you. Thank you.